All right. So first of all, welcome everyone. We're so thrilled to be doing this. Doug Woodring and I, we've known each other for years, and we've discussed a collaboration like this for a very long time. And I'm thrilled to see this finally come to life with this initial webinar. The origin story is quite simple. The open water swimming community is a natural leader to invest in the health and protection of our natural waterways because we're literally in the water. Very few sports are you fully immersed in natural bodies of water, and it's a logical leap for us to be on the front lines of preserving and protecting. So at WOWSA, we work with event organizers from around the world, and we have a growing directory of upcoming events. And over the last year, consistently, the event that gets the most interest is the Bosphorus Cross-Continental swim. It's iconic, it's historic, and it's one of the largest events in the world. So it's special to have the man here who was responsible for transforming that iconic event and radically altering its environmental footprint. So while we designed today's discussion with event organizers in mind, as everyone knows, it kind of takes a village to put on an event with countless volunteers. So the goal is to provide the tools to anyone to get involved in an event as a swimmer, as a volunteer, to step up and use this methodology to reduce plastic use. And we hope this will be the beginning of a movement in open water swimming, one that encourages not only event organizers in our sport, but any sport to get involved. And I want to thank everyone who has shown up today and raised their hand and identified this as an area where we can have an impact. Today, we're going to discuss the challenges and opportunity with plastic use. We're going to look at a remarkable case study in the Bosphorus Cross-Continental swim, and we're going to discuss the Ocean Recovery Alliance's plastic footprinting methodology, which was the first of its kind in the world. And then we're going to open it up to questions. So have your questions ready, or feel free to put them in the chat as we go, and I will moderate the Q&A. So without further ado, I would like to introduce our hosts. We have Doug Woodring, is the founder and managing director of the Ocean Recovery Alliance. He is a United Nations climate hero. He's a Google Earth hero and winner of the Prince Prize for NGO work on the environment and the ocean. He's International Open Water Swimming Hall of Fame and organizer of some of the largest ocean events in all of Asia. He is also the creator of PDP, the Plastic Disclosure Project, the sports program for event organizers, plastic reduction. Welcome, Doug. And
thank you, Quinn.
You're very happy to see you here. We also have Gursel Sen, who is the former VP of the Bosphorus Organizing Committee, and he's on the Turkish Olympic Committee. And he is the past executive board member of the Turkish Olympic Committee, and he was the vice president of the organizing committee for Bosphorus Centennial Swim until last year. So, and Gursel is also the vice president of the Turkish Rowing Federation, another water-based sport that we hope to recruit and get involved in this initiative. So, with that, I will kick it over to you guys, and everyone else, be ready with questions or feel free to write them in the chat.
Great. Quinn, thank you, and thanks everyone for joining. As Quinn said, swimming is, we're front and center on experience with the water and the pollution. And, it's a perfect opportunity for us to be leading in this space with our events. And in this case, environmental management. So with swimming at the front line, we really do want to engage and inspire other sports, and that doesn't have to just be the water sports. So whenever you, hopefully this inspires you a little bit, and you've got friends who might be doing running races or triathlons or bike races, it doesn't matter. Any event organizer, especially with non-permanent venues, where they go in and come out quickly, can make a really big impact if you just think about your waste profile before the race. So we're going to talk about a little bit PDP sport. I am based in Hong Kong, and I've been living in Asia for over 30 years and running swim races as a hobby, but not as a business. But Ocean Recovery Alliance has been around 15 years, and I founded that. And we, as Quinn said, were the first to create a plastic footprinting methodology in the world. We launched it in 2010. For those of you who follow plastic issues, that was a long time ago and probably 10 years too early. But because of my interest in the water and sports, we applied this to the sporting event world a long time ago. And what it really is about is not necessarily getting rid of all of your plastic. We're not trying to create a super heavy lift for everyone. That's impossible, because we all have plastic somewhere in our lives and our world. But the issue is how to manage it better, and how to manage it almost with the outreach and the pride that people see that you're doing it, even though you have to have it in some cases, that you're managing it well on the back end, collecting it, recovering it, recycling it. And that's all part of the story, which then helps you with your branding and hopefully your messaging. I'm just going to talk a tiny bit of a little history of why there is such an issue with plastic pollution in the first place, because a lot of times people just talk about plastic bags and straws, and that's about as deep as they go in the discussion. But plastic is arguably more complicated to solve than climate change. Doesn't mean it's a bigger issue or a more dangerous issue, but it is certainly complicated. There's 7 families that plastic lives in. I mean, 7 types of plastic in the categories, but there's almost 40,000 plus versions of that, with different colors, different melting points, different shapes and sizes, and that chemicals that really makes it complicated to recycle. So in this case, the boy in Jakarta, almost everything there could be made into use or some kind of value if there was energy or gas. Some people don't agree with that, but it is a value and it's a way to remove it. But in reality, most of the world doesn't have any of that, and therefore it gets put in the rivers or burned open pit. In this case, the boy is picking up straws because there's value to it. So if we collectively put value on the other material, for whatever reason it can be used in a second life, then it won't be thrown in the river. And just a quick analogy on the difficulty of recycling. And you look at this picture, a great analogy is reconstituting an omelet, is how difficult recycling is. So if you make an omelet with eggs, cheese, milk, peppers, and mushrooms, someone says, "Thank you very much, Doug. Great omelet, but please put it all back in the original format for me." That is pretty hard to do, and that's really what recycling faces, particularly when the material is contaminated with other materials like food and wet material. And so that makes it harder to sort and put back together for the batches that are used for proper recycling. The other challenge we have, hopefully most of you haven't seen this in your swim races, but this is unfortunately a day in Hong Kong a number of years ago. And many countries in the world have this as a daily issue. It's not because they want it. It's not because they try to make it and they try to litter, but it's simply that they don't have the infrastructure in that country or region to handle the material, or it gets flooded from up upriver somewhere else, and it comes down into their ocean waters through the river and gets the beaches. But the problem is people who grow up with this think that it's the normal way. They don't necessarily call anyone when they go to the beach. They don't try to pick it up. Obviously, that's a lot of work in this case. But if people think that this is the normal scenario, then it's difficult for them to feel it in their heart and their mind that there's another way to improve upon. And so the more we can message that and show examples of it, the better that will be. As some of you might know, if you're following the plastic issue, the UN is now in the second year of a 2-year negotiation. It's the fastest negotiation they've ever tried to put together on this time for plastic pollution, much like they did with climate and the Paris discussions. I was attending the Paris talk for plastic as well as the Nairobi one in November. The next one will be in Ottawa in April. And they intend to finish it at the end of this year in Korea in November. But there's a lot of stakeholders, over 200 countries and businesses and NGOs and civil society, all negotiating for different positions on reductions and taxes and bans and reuse and all of the different things you can imagine that will help us reduce plastic pollution. And sports is something that's never really talked about in these discussions at all. But yet we as athletes are always the ones who are outside or maybe inside, but we're training, we're thinking about our health, we want to compete well, we want a nice place to train and compete and recreate. And so we all should and could be the real ambassadors for the environment, because we're on the front line and we see it a lot more than people see it when they're just in a city walking around and not noticing. This graph is pretty interesting. It looks fairly boring probably, but it's much like the climate graph that you've probably seen with the carbon CO2 growing. In this case, it's plastic use in the last decades. And the bottom line is essentially a flat line of the investment that's gone into recycling and infrastructure for waste management and collection and recovery material. So you can just see, very easily the huge gap that the world has in needed capacity to corral, maintain, recover, clean, grind, shred, and hopefully recycle, because we don't want to be burning this all the time, and we don't want to just put it in landfills, of course not in the rivers and other things. So this gap is the challenge that we all face in our respective countries, and there's no country really who doesn't have some sort of a problem. So anything we can do as event organizers or participants or volunteers is a big help. One of the reasons we have such a big issue is there's not that many rules where brands and retailers need to play to. There's not enough regulations on packaging. There's not standardization. There's not a need to collect material at the point of purchase. I mean, all of these Apple containers, for example, could be removed at the point of retail and stacked up very nicely, and the apples can go home to someone's house. And then you have a very clean and large volume of the same type of material, which is uncontaminated. And that's really what the recyclers will then come and want to pick up and make use of. But if you take all those apples home to everyone's house in a 50-mile zone, and they all throw them away in a plastic bag with chicken grease and noodles and coffee, they will never get unscrambled like that omelet and turned back into recycling. You have packaging on things that don't need it, like the aluminum containers for sunscreen. That's really just so that they can make it stand better on a shelf. And these are things that we have to sort of compete with as citizens who don't want to throw away as much, but we're giving it at the point of retail. I've sort of talked about these points before, but events are a great way to message environmental stewardship. It's a great way for the host cities to be involved, and the volunteers and the participants, the viewers. It's a great way to show that all kinds of plastic can be managed. Technically, every kind of plastic in the world can be recycled. The problem is that they are never put into the economies of scale with the right types in the right volume that gets people excited to then have the machines to be able to handle it. So often it doesn't get recycled. And in fact, only 10% of the world's plastic does get recycled. So technically it can, but usually it doesn't. So we can align with a global cause, and as we take on this challenge in our events. Plastic pollution is probably the second biggest talked about environmental issue in the media, next to climate change, and it affects everyone's water. Probably infects about 2 billion people a day, actually, through water quality, which impacts health, drinking, washing, tourism, fishing, agriculture, and of course, ecosystem and animals. And so anything that we can do to show that a group of 2 or 3 or 10,000 people gathering together can manage this is a great way to carry the word and educate. I think I said at the beginning, the PDP sport, Plastic Disclosure Project, was really meant originally for businesses and institutions or governments, but we then created versions of it for sporting events or any event, could be music or art, any gathering of people. We have a national park version, PDP Parks, so that a national park or a state park could also do this in their jurisdiction. But again, swimming being a leader, if we can inspire other sports to get involved in this, it would be a great story for all of us. And as I said before, it's not about saying no to every single thing, because that's hard to do, but it's knowing how to think ahead, how to reduce what you can very quickly. That's things like plates and forks and the F&B, the catering, also things like t-shirts or caps. When you hand those out, they're usually sent to you by the factory in individually wrapped plastic packaging. You can easily take that off before the race begins, off-site the day before, so that all that plastic is captured separately and it doesn't blow around in the wind and on your race day. And this can all be, engaged in your messaging and branding during the event. So athletes can participate. You might be friends with an event organizer who doesn't know about this program. They might not have the time to be involved in this themselves at the beginning, but you and your friends could say, hey, we can go through this checklist, PDP Sport, with you, Mr. Organizer or Mrs. Organizer, and we'll help you out with it. It's really not rocket science. It's really about going through the questions and thinking about how you can cut out the low-hanging fruit pretty quickly. If you do have the need for for the use of plastic bottles, for example, for drinking, many countries don't have good potable water, so you need either some kind of refilling system, but sometimes those don't exist. And you need water, and you need a brand maybe to support you with those bottles or those drinks. But that's a great opportunity for that brand to then get involved with 20 of their employees who come to the event with their t-shirts on and very proudly collect every single thing that is given out, so that it does never even hit the ground, and it's recycled and it's very visible. And this helps educate all of the people and bring knowledge and trust, which is a big thing, to the recycling system, as well as the event and the host city and the host location. Events have a great audience to speak to. Not only might there be 2,000 people swimming or racing, but they probably have 3 or 4 friends who might come and watch. Certainly they have 5 or 6 family members that are paying attention, and maybe more in different cities. And these are all, multiplier effects that you can help talk about. And with the UN plastic treaty being discussed, any mayor or government representative these days is quite aware of this topic. And if you are an event organizer or friends with one, and you want your event to be cleaner and greener, this is a pretty easy way and a high touch point, a high topic point for you to engage brands and sponsors, and hopefully get some great PR along the way with it. We don't require really any costs for this. It's more about thinking and managing. And if you're gonna use a bunch of t-shirts and give away 1,500 t-shirts, you unwrap all of them before the event. That means that 1,500 people got a t-shirt, but they didn't get a piece of plastic to go with it that they've got to throw away and have that experience. But that doesn't really cost you anything. It might be a little volunteer time in the beginning, but ideally, with your supplier, you would call them a month ahead of time and say, Mr. T-shirt supplier, please send me a box of those t-shirts, but only wrapped in one bag, so maybe they keep dry, for 100 t-shirts, but not in 100 bags, one for each t-shirt. That's hard to do because the manufacturers don't necessarily do small scale things like that, but it is something you can start thinking about and ask for if you just look at the questions ahead of time. So some of the questions is, have you considered all the situations where plastic might be used? Like I said, swimming cap, it could be goggle caps, t-shirts, it could be food and beverage, catering. Can they be replaced or substituted with something more sustainable? Can it be paper plates? Can it be, paper napkins? Obviously paper napkin, but just thinking about things that you can not have that still serves the purpose. Can you use a different type of plastic if you need to have it? So it might be possible that you have something that comes with recycled content in it or fully recycled already. Just saying recyclable doesn't mean that it has already been recycled or has recycled content. What we all need to collectively do is create a demand for the use of recycled content. So if you have a way to do that, even if it's through clothing use, meaning that there's recycled content in the clothing, I know some of you will probably have some questions and argue about that with microplastic, but we can get into that later. And where there is plastic used, how do we take it away? How do we gather it the right way and even do that proudly and visibly so that the audience knows that you know what you're doing? It shows that you're a step or two ahead of the game and that you've already got this figured out. So Gursel, I'm going to go through a couple slides here and maybe ask you a few questions as I show some of the slides that relate to the Cross-Bosphorus swim, which I attended in 2018 and 2019. And this is arguably one of the most amazing swim races in the world. The setting, the water quality, the course, the organization, everything. And we're very proud to have the Cross-Bosphorus Organizing Committee and Samsung and Turkish Olympic Committee very quickly embrace the PDP sport program as soon as they learned about it. And so it went on all their branding on the next year. There's a certificate that we give out and anyone can use that and the logo. This was in the second year. I was on the stage there with Gursel and the Olympic Committee and Samsung. And it really was a main discussion point in the launch of the swimming event of that year, because they were proud of it, and it really had a great ripple effect into the Bosphorus and into the water community and the sports community. Gursel, do you want to say anything about this and why you
Thank you very
decided to
much,
take it
Doug.
on, and what you thought about having it when we introduced it?
Yeah, thank you very much, Doug. And also, I would like to take the opportunity of thanking you, PDP, and WOWSA in this respect. Regarding your guidelines, as you have experienced, we have done a great job and raise the awareness with plastic pollution, because sometimes it is inevitable to get out of the plastics, especially we faced this during the pandemic, but to recover them and to recycle them is very important. Up to now, we were incorporating with Chevco, which is an environmental protection and packaging waste evaluation foundation. But due to new regulations, the municipalities take care of this duty, and we are incorporating with the greater municipality of Istanbul in this respect. It was a good experience, and you have seen the results after 1 year.
Yeah.
Because
So
this
if
was
I
a
could
good
just jump
publicity.
in, this is this is no one's real fault, but like I showed in one of the first slides, it's common in many places everywhere in the rivers, and this is what we grow up with, and so people sometimes we just haven't thought about it in such a way to focus in on an event. But just after this, look at what happened in the next year. It was completely clean from the very, very beginning. And as Gursel said, Chebco is one of the recycling associations there. They got very involved to be a complementary partner in the race, and so Gursel had a lot to do with changing the way that the plastic was handed out at the beginning. Even the slippers, if you've been to this race before, you know that you have to get on the ferry, and there's 2 or 3 ferries with thousands of people, and they all wear slippers, which come in a package, and that's to protect their feet. But then they're collected and handled appropriately at the end. So Gursel, I don't know if you want to. We also had a reward program, right? So that people got something.
Yes.
How did that work?
Actually, the land, the park, Cemil Topuzlu Park, is about 80,000 square meters, which 2/3 of it is green area, as you see. I would like to mention that this park is divided into 2 sections during the race. One is the athlete area, and this part is the spectators area. The slide that showed previously was in the athletes area after the race. So all the people after 1 hour swim, which is about more than 6,500 meters from Asia to Europe.
Mhm.
So during this short period of time, you have seen that everybody needs water, and We cannot distribute waters by stations because we had to use single-use bottles. As you have seen on the spectator area, Chevco has done a great job because we also make a consumer education. As a reward system, if they bring 10 or I don't know the number, they got some rewards. The kids get brochures or booklets. The spectators get hats when you consider that the race is in August or late July. It's very hot and sunny, so it's a good gift. By this, they create an awareness, also a kind of education for kids. They know
So that was if they brought in 10 bottles, they got a gift, right? So there was a
yes,
reward for
yes,
bringing in bottles.
yes. And
right.
you have seen on this slide how they collect. Its container is a big bottle shape. On the right, you see. For the cardboards or the other waste, they have that container. So it was a good
Yeah.
job,
So-
and we know the importance of recycling and reusing this waste.
Yeah. So that's yeah, excellent opportunity, and you're still doing that at the event. So that's shows we're all gonna. I think once people start this program, they quickly understand in a way how easy it is, and then they start thinking about ways to get a little bit better the next year, and then the next year, and the next year. So once you get started, obviously there's at some point you might need to level out because you still need certain things, but usually there's a lot of low-hanging fruit where you can make a big impact. We did something. We were the first to work with the Rugby Sevens tournament in Hong Kong a number of years ago, also, and just to show again that it's not just about the water sports, but any sport can play a role here. So I think with that, Gursel, thank you so much for your input, and let's see if the audience has any questions and what
Thank
we can
you.
share, and hopefully some people like to join us in this adventure on racing and the environment.
Thank you, Doug. And I would like to tell you something else. I am still trying to promote this to the other events, especially water sports, because I was in the rowing federation before, and now University Sports Federation will organize European Universities Championship in Ankara, and I have been in contacting with them to follow the same procedures for themselves, and soon maybe you have to give a certificate to the federation.
Oh, that would be great. We would love to do it. Be a great example. Can anyone have any questions, comments, ideas? Do you have any there, Quinn?
No, not yet. You guys, feel free to type in your questions or simply raise your hand, virtual or real hand, and we'll call on you. Well, to warm up, Doug, I remember when I put on an event in Southern California in 2019, the city put me in touch with the local collection center, recycling center, and they were incredibly easy to work with, and basically took care of all of the recycling needs for the event itself. I was wondering if you've seen any pattern recognition of, who are these entities, and what should your first phone call be to try to engage either the city or a collection center or recycling company. Do you have any advice for folks out there?
Yeah, well, that's a good question. So recyclers always want volume and pure material. The purer it is, the easier it is for them to process and clean and get to the next market. So if you go to them and say, hey, I have 500 or 2,000 or 10,000 people coming to my event on Saturday or Sunday, we're going to have so many bottles because we need water and we have these things. We're going to, if you tell them that they can help gather this, probably they're going to be quite interested to be part of that. It's good PR for them. It gets them a lot of material. If you need to still have that kind of material, even plastic bags of t-shirts, to you, it might not seem like large volume in terms of weight and mass, and it probably isn't. But the fact that you could still find a taker for that for 1,000 t-shirts or 2,000, the ones who do that kind of recycling will be very happy to have that volume of material that's clean. And so the city council should be very supportive of anything that you want to do. And I think one phone call to them would then connect you. You might not know the recycler, you might not know who is best to handle that part of the waste stream, but the city council will know, and they can probably help you quite quickly to connect with that. But also the brands, don't forget that your sponsors can and should play a role. If they're giving you free material for prizes or consumption or use, they have a role to play to recover that material back or part of that packaging if they've put it into your race. And hopefully they're proud to be part of that story. So I think my point there is you don't have to take all of the onus and volunteering time yourself if you discuss it the right way with your sponsors and put some of the responsibility on them and their teams and their employees to also get engaged in your event, especially if they're not paying you money. Right. If they're just giving you free material, then that's the least they can do to get, to really give you support for your race, not just a bunch of free bottles. Yeah.
Great. No, that makes sense. Okay, so we have a question in the chat from Stephanie who asks, do you have an idea of the annual impact of open water sporting events on a global level in terms of, plastic consumption use? And, she's trying to get a picture of the urgency of promoting these kinds of initiatives. I think I know the answer, but Doug, you're more qualified to address it.
Well, the answer in terms of events and people. I don't know that exact number, but it's certainly, I'm sure it's in the hundreds of thousands in a year. And that doesn't, that's only the direct participants, not the family members and the spectators and the organizers and the sponsors and the press. I mean, your reach for these events is big. And to create the ripple effect with the right message, very strong, but not a negative message, but a very empowering and leadership related message that we're so happy to be having this event. We know we need to have a few things that are plastic, but we've really already planned for it. We're addressing it. That will set you apart from a lot of other things. And sports can do this to an audience in a really meaningful way, very different than other events or other gatherings where people are not so physically active in what they're doing or watching.
Yeah.
Do you have any numbers on that, Quinn? Maybe.
So no, and in fact, I was just going to point out, I mean, the open water swimming community is truly global. There are tens of thousands of events around the world, but there's no singular governing body, you know, measuring or tracking any of this, and that's the beauty of this initiative. Is not to, you know, we know it's a problem, but in measuring it year over year, we can quantify it and measure tangible impact and improvement. And I think that's really what we're all doing here. So that's a great question, but I don't think those metrics exist. And you know, we have to start somewhere. Okay, so we have a question from Bibiana. Fantastic subject. I'm sure that small actions can make a big difference. How to give a second life to our old wetsuit. So that's interesting. You know, so rubber, different material entirely. But have you been a part of any discussions, Doug, about second life?
I have not been because I don't like cold water like you do. So I usually swim only with no wetsuits. But of course I have some, and I'm pretty sure some of the surfing brands, and I don't know so much about the swimming brands, but I wouldn't be surprised these days if they have a take back or a bring back program for wetsuits. I know that, you know, I believe you can grind them up, and there are ways to reuse that material for different things, but rubber is not something that we've focused a lot on in our work on plastic. It's a different material, different animal, and not something you see day to day in the water as a consumption product that makes pollution. So it's not really has been our main focus, but great question. And I bet you that there are people that could handle that if you look around on Google or something. Yeah.
Lynn asks, in terms of basic logistics, will ORA, Ocean Recovery Alliance, assist in the development of marketing PDP?
Yeah, we would assist in the marketing. Certainly on our social media, we're not a giant organization, but WOWSA is. And Quinn, you know, the whole point of us getting together here is for all of us to share in the mission and the excitement of this. And if we can support each other, you know, once this brand can be more institutionalized a little bit and people understand, oh, my event is PDP Sport, qualified or certified. Again, it's not an onerous real task. There's no right or wrong number when you do this survey for yourself. It's like looking at yourself in the mirror and saying, hey, how much do I use? How much do we recover? How much could we get rid of? So the point is to get a baseline and understand what you have in year one where you start, and then see what you can do in year two after you make some changes in year three. But messaging this is what we all could gain from. So yes, we would help push that out, and hopefully that everyone can do it for each other, because then there's you know, more safety in numbers.
Yeah, that's a great point. It's about improvement year over year and just having a framework to do the initial measurement. So Tim Hammond from Grinnell College says there are a lot of options for recycling swim gear in Europe, but not as many in the US. I think that's something I've observed as well, Tim.
Yeah, Europe does have more regulations and more different standards, and you know, in some ways that's just a new opportunity to make a bigger noise, a good noise in a market where they don't have it yet. You might find a local brand who really would love to be part of that story, but they've never been asked to do it. They've never tried. So you know, could be a great way to get a new sponsor, a new PR opportunity with someone.
Yeah. So Stephanie Montero says she's launching an event this year in Mexico, and we'll definitely take this into account. I think we do. Does anyone want to just kind of talk about their experience as an event organizer and how they might implement something like this? Is anyone willing to share their kind of personal stories? Lynn, Stephanie, Tim, maybe not. That's fine.
Well, I would, you know, sort of in closing, I don't want to keep everyone too long, but just a reminder that this webinar is being recorded, and Quinn will help distribute it so that for anyone who couldn't make it today because of time zones or other conflict, certainly we can watch this and share it in the future and see what we can do in this first year to get more groups in. I mean, I think thank you so much, Gursel, and your support at the Cross Bosphorus Swim, because you know, that name is phenomenal, and the branding and even the location. Some people don't expect things always to come from places that you know, maybe don't talk about this issue as much. And to have this right before COVID, we got stalled a bit with COVID, but I think the COVID, as you alluded to, made people reflect even a bit more on the plastic that was being used for protection or for takeout food, and also just their own health and wellness.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So we have Mark Turner here, who's the founder of Ultra Swim 33.3. And Mark, what have you seen out there in the marketplace?
Hi, Quinn. Well, so we're a young event, although I'm not at all new to the sustainability space, having put in some big programs in sailing and other sports, particularly around plastic with the Volvo Ocean Race. But in Ultra Swim events, so we only ran our first full scale event last September, but we have successfully managed to complete zero single use plastic in the event. So one of the things we had to do excuse me, had to do to achieve that is we include in the swimmer's pack aluminium, really high quality aluminium water bottle, which allows us to say that's it, no plastic bottles anywhere. So we actually make it a rule. It's a rule in the race, and it's a penalty in the race. It's a 4-day race, Ultra Swim 33.3. So it's, you know, it's in some ways harder, in some ways easier to put that kind of thing in. And we're talking about, you know, 200 swimmers and 100. It applies equally to the fans and family that are there. So there's another 100, 150 people in the same way, and we include that in their event package. That way, we're able to completely stop any bottles going on the water. We're moving swimmers by boats and things as well to the starts or from the finishes. So, and then equally plastic bags, full stop. And we actually encourage our swimmers. We get them to sign everyone signs a charter, a sustainability charter, a registration with 10 key points that they're doing. And the other ones include, for example, you go to the supermarket, you refuse the plastic bag, which I can say in Montenegro is they're trying to force them on you. So where our first event is, and it's the same in many countries, other than the ones that have banned plastic bags like France. But you're trying, it's not only about your own footprint, but it's about being able to influence the local community where the event is as well, by your actions. Then providing the water, and I know, you know, I'm sure it's quite challenging in I've run an event in Istanbul, so sailing events in Istanbul, so I know it's not that easy necessarily to avoid the single-use bottles and provide the water, but there is always now, you know, wholesale water solutions. So we're renting the big wholesale distributors, and that way people are getting the water. You can't drink it depends whether you can drink the tap water or not, which is not the case in every country. So that's quite complex to do. We've got the hotels to add. The hotels we use to add filtering stations for our event, which they've then kept, so that again people are able to be sure they can, again, in a country where you can't always use the tap water straight, that means we can guarantee the swimmers that you can do that. The interesting one, which is you can have a big impact on, and I have now for a few years in the various events that I've managed in different sports, but to do with what you mentioned, Doug, with suppliers. 10 years ago, when I started insisting that suppliers of merchandise shipped without plastic, it was quite hard to convince them, until I started threatening, well, we're not going to use you anymore. And I, in some very big scale events in those days, but actually now it's very easy to talk to suppliers and say, no, I want you to provide me no virgin materials in the products we want. So always repurposed materials, which you can get for almost everything now. And then equally no plastic packaging. And actually it's much easier to insist on that now. You don't want the plastic to leave the factory. I mean, that's the number one thing. We don't want the plastic at the beginning. And recycling is okay, but it's not a solution on anything really. So ultimately we're trying to reduce use of any virgin materials, the plastic side and the packaging, but equally in the actual product we buy. We're doing medals now, which I know goes beyond the plastic side, but we're doing medals which are only made from repurposed materials, so zero virgin material. It's all nice to have a great shiny metal medal with a ribbon, which is usually has some plastic content in it as well, but actually we're using wooden medals made from repurposed furniture with strings that are from old paragliding things. So not only is it interesting, it's usually not that much expensive, but it's also storytelling content about being innovative on how you can do things a little bit different and not just take the cheapest, simplest route. So anyway, there's some little different examples in there, but I think it's the heart of every event now to reduce the footprint, but also use their ability to impact other people in the local communities and other people about the actions that we can actually take.
Great work, Mark. That's phenomenal.
Yeah, impressive. Very good. Does anyone else have any comments? Please share, your experiences if you get into this, and Quinn and I are here to help answer questions along the way. If you're planning something in a few months or beyond, let us know and we can help you figure a few things out. So it's easy to get started. Actually, there's no super heavy lift. It's just getting the right focus on it, and I think you'll see that it can really reap great rewards for everyone.
Absolutely. Thank you guys so much for showing up, stepping up, and getting involved in this. I think this is going to be something we're all proud of, and a great way for our niche sport to be a leader in all sports and sports administration. So thank you guys, and please don't hesitate to reach out if you have follow-up ideas, questions. This is the beginning of something, and we're excited to have you all involved.
Thank you, Quinn. Thanks for hosting.
Gursel, good to see you. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Gursel.
Thank you. I thank you also. It was a good opportunity.
Absolutely.
See you all.